Before we get into the topic and why it's so important to me, I want to ease people into my stance on this. Nintendo has made some of my all-time favorite games, specifically Ocarina of Time, Luigi's Mansion, Twilight Princess, and Majora's Mask. There's more I could add to the list, but then the video would be way too long. With the release of Nintendo's newer games, like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, and Tears of the Kingdom, the gameplay has started to undergo a change. And for me personally, I'm not a fan of those games, and I miss the old style that made the ones I listed famous. The newer Zelda feels empty, and lacks the quality dungeons that I love. Mario's objectives are too easy, and the cap gimmick for me didn't really catch my interest. So as a fan of Nintendo's older games, I have a couple solutions that I can go to solve this problem. Firstly, and the most obvious one, I can replay the games I love. I can jump from Majora's Mask's dark tone and stressful time-based mechanics, then I can go to Ocarina of Time's epic and groundbreaking story, and so on and so forth. I'm also in the process of beating Wind Waker, and I've enjoyed it so far. I can live without there being a sequel to most of these games, but I do wish we'd return to the old formula they used to have. But there's also the other option I can turn to. I can play slightly newer games in the Zelda series, in search of a gem. I am very excited to play Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, especially after I finished Wind Waker. I played those games a bit as a kid, and they were fun-looking adventures. Same with the 2D games as well. However, I believe there's one solution that fixes all my problems. I've always wanted to mod one single game series, and that's Zelda. Modding just makes a game so much better and gives it infinite replayability. It makes it so I can have new content within these phenomenal games, whether it be story or gameplay and everything in between. Just imagining making my own Zelda adventure in that world with those N64 engines would be amazing. I'd have a whole new story with new villains, heroes, and side characters, crazy new boss battles, and my own flavor of dungeons too. And with the advent of the decompilation and recompilation projects that allow us to look at the game's code in a programming language that isn't assembly, it's even more tempting. Same with the Mario games themselves. It would be great to create my own version of Luigi's Mansion, since the modding communities are getting even crazier with that. But there's one thing that's stopping me from doing that. Nintendo's attitude towards modders has been extremely toxic. They throw out cease and desists at anyone who wants to experience their property in a slightly different way. They don't care if the community begs for them to just let them be. Most of the masses don't mod games. That is a fact. The core audience of Nintendo will still buy the new games and consoles no matter what happens, which is why it confuses me as to why Nintendo cares so much about what you do with their old games. I get not wanting us to tweak and mess around with the new releases, as they're brand new and Nintendo doesn't want them to be overshadowed. If I make a game with a great formula and spawn a series from it, I don't care if someone mods the older titles, personally. You may be asking, how does Nintendo solve this problem? There is one company that lets people do whatever they want with their games, one that doesn't care because they aren't insecure about their game selling or not. One that tells the community to go for it as long as they don't sell the mods for money. They need to follow the example of Sega. When Sega sees a fan make a very successful mod or fan game, they hire that person. And that's because they understand the passion that this community has for the series. Without that, games like Sonic Mania wouldn't exist. And that was made by a fan. Meanwhile, old-fashioned Nintendo waits 6 years to release a new mainline Zelda game while fans are starved of content. And guess what can fill that gap? Mods and fan games. Seriously, Nintendo's more obscure series like Metroid would be more popular if they just allowed fans to do whatever they wanted with their old games. I know most of you who are watching are probably thinking, Nintendo will never do this. They're too stubborn. But I disagree. You're probably also thinking it's a lost cause. It's not going to happen. In my years of being a gamer, I've seen Metal Gear, Spider-Man PS4, the rest of the Halo games, and Sonic all get ported to PC. Heck, Nintendo themselves released multiple educational Mario games and the Pokemon trading card game on the PC, so why not? Going back to Sega, they had the business sense to know that they can't go on forever in terms of console development. The Dreamcast was ultimately what killed their run despite it being a really great system. Now, why do I sound so hopeful for the future? Hear me out. Miyamoto and the old guard will one day retire. It is an inevitable fact. Newer, more business-savvy people could be on the way. Nintendo can't always remain at the top, and I believe at some point, consoles themselves will become obsolete in general. Computers can do so much more than play games. Plus, the customizability of computers and the fact that they're also used to make the games themselves should be an indication of the future in itself. So that leaves Nintendo with a choice. Do they stay stubborn and try to carve out a path in the console wars? A battle which even Sony is starting to exit with their numerous PC ports. Or do they adapt with the times and go multi-platform? I'm not saying they can't make consoles anymore. I'm saying they need to let go of their possessiveness over their games that they make and just let fans have fun with the games they love so much. Because one day they'll be the last man standing, and that doesn't bode well for anybody in this new market. Times have changed and they need to change with them. Put the games on Steam for people to enjoy and mod to their heart's content. The core audience can enjoy the base experience on the hardware it's intended to be run on, while the outliers can go experience old titles in a whole new way. Not only that, but multi-platform also means money. Seriously, Nintendo's games would make even more of a killing if they let everybody play them. Certain people who never got to play these games will finally be able to enjoy them without having to buy inferior hardware that runs poorly and ends up just being straight up nickel and diming. That's what I believe will happen at the end of the day, and it isn't a bad thing to want either. More people playing these great games is a net win for everybody. So the ball is in your court, Nintendo. It's up to you whether your company thrives or falls. But you'll have to think about this one day, and when that day comes, I'll be over the moon. And also, you made great games, let everybody play them. Seriously, don't force them to buy inferior hardware. Gaming is for everybody, console wars are stupid, so let's move on from those archaic times and move into the future, for everybody's sake.